You're listening to In-Fisherman Storyline, North America's top voice in multi-species freshwater angling. Here is your host, Thomas Allen.
Welcome to another episode of In-Fisherman Storyline. This is a road trip, and this is a very special one. In fact, I was looking forward to doing this. I kind of had the idea of doing this podcast, Bret, when you and I talked a year ago, of taking all the podcast equipment to a destination and really getting the experience there. And we're in a very... I have had so much fun. I'm not leaving.
Perfect.
I'm going to hide out in the cabin. But we're at Tazin Lake Lodge in northern Saskatchewan. We are hunting giant lake trout, big pike, and having the time of our lives filming an In-Fisherman TV episode. But I'm so intrigued by how this place was discovered and managed and what makes it such a world-class destination that we had to get the whole story. So we've got a couple interesting people here, a couple Minnesota boys that spend a lot of time here, Bret and Dan Amundson. If you recognize those names, you should, because they spend a lot of time making outdoor media. And I've written this down, Bret, but I promise you I'm going to get it wrong. But
that's all right.
You walk me through what you do.
There's a lot, so I don't blame you for getting it wrong. But we do a radio show and a podcast called Sporting Journal Radio that airs on 30 radio stations around the region, and on YouTube you can watch it. It's on Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and we've been doing that for about 11 years now. Dan's been a part of it for the last few years, so that's been a lot of fun. We do a TV show called Prairie Sportsman, and that airs on all the PBS stations around the upper Midwest region: Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, Iowa. I think we're on Illinois, Wyoming, right? Yeah. And the PBS. I know you've been on the commercial side of TV. The public side of it is almost as confusing sometimes.
I'm sure.
But at the same time, it's easy. Like any PBS affiliate in the country, an affiliate's not the exact right word for it, but they're all individual, but they're all together, if that kind of makes sense. But they can pick up the show for free, so we don't have to pay to distribute the show. It's kind of nice. But then it's also very hard to sell. So well, it goes back and forth.
And you guys are busy 24/7. I know you shoot a lot of photography, and you're, as we have it written here, you're the host of Tazin TV, which is a cool thing that goes on here.
Yeah, so we do that YouTube show. We got 4 YouTube channels and a lot of freelance stuff and product stuff. But starting in 2017, we started doing some YouTube content up here at Tazin Lake Lodge. Well,
it's been exciting. I watched all of it before I got here. Anyway, next to Bret is Dan, who I mistakenly thought was his son.
Wow. I don't know how to feel about that one.
Dan represents the younger generation here, but does a lot of camera work, and you guys kind of tag team a lot of this production, and a couple of good dudes, and I'm glad you're doing this with me. You've said a lot of things this week that I ignored, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, could you hear it over the sound of a Yamaha?
Yeah, barely. What are you saying? And then Trevor Montgomery is our guest here too as well, and you co-own Tazin Lodge with Barry Prawl.
Yeah, that's true. Since 2018, Barry and I have been partners in this.
Barry is out fishing today.
He's guiding.
Yeah. That's the job here. You got to get people on big fish. But
absolutely, yeah.
Let's dig into the history of this place. Tell me your story about your very first visit here.
Sure, yeah. My first visit here, I was dropped off. It was the earliest the ice had ever gone off, and one other guy and myself never been here. And basically just came in to check out camp. I was going to be the head guide, and just started looking around and started putting, going and pre-fishing days before GPS is due as well. So there's a lot of looking back at the islands and all those natural landmarks, and spent a couple weeks just figuring things out a little bit. And then other staff came in and just your typical maintenance. And I walked in, the generator roof had fallen down that winter, and it was laying on top of the generator.
So this camp was established when you got
here?
It
was, yeah. This camp was established in the 50s. Yeah.
So what drew you here? How'd you hear about it?
A guy that I knew that I had worked for at a different lodge had purchased a lodge and invited me to come and work for him. And so I took him up on the offer. I just wanted to check something different out, and had a time in life for a change, and that started it all.
Well, this place, there's just a lot of history here. I know that there's is it considered an impoundment? I mean, I know there was a natural lake here, but there is a flowage that goes through here, and there is a couple hydroelectric dams related to this. Is that right?
Yeah, there'd be three. And so back in the 30s, they actually dammed off the lake on the outflow and put bored a tunnel through the rock to change the flow so it goes south instead of north now. And it feeds down into Lake Athabasca, and that's where they've set up their series of hydro dams there.
Man, could you imagine bringing that stuff in here in the 30s, you said?
No. Yeah. Steam shovel and horse. That's how they set a lot of that stuff up. It was pretty wild how, the history of what they were able to do.
Just cutting the trail to get here is probably an immaculate story.
Well, and it's a mountain range you're crossing.
Right.
So it's a Saskatchewan mountain range. And it's in the wintertime as well, it's not very formidable. There's 5 feet, 6 feet of snow. And I remember the first year I did come in here one year in the wintertime in 2007, and it was quite the ordeal. It was a couple-day ordeal to get in, and when I drove up to the lodge with a skidoo, I could have driven onto the roof of the skidoo. That's how big the snowdrift was across the front of the lodge. Yeah, it was unbelievable.
So is there a reason to bring equipment here during the winter? Is that ever a process that you guys do, or do you try to keep it during the open water time?
Well, typically what we do is there's an ice road to Uranium City, so that's the other side of the mountain range. So a lot of times we will, stockpile freight there, dried goods, lumber, heavy stuff, and then it's closer. That way, it's only 25 miles from the lodge.
There's a resort owner that I know down south. He actually retired from Rowan Lake. I think it was Don Persh, and told me a story once about how they got their fuel in and they got all of their materials in during the winter, and if they had a warmer winter, they weren't putting a bulldozer on the ice, right? That's, to anybody in the South, that's a scary thing. Walking on the ice is scary, let alone putting a bulldozer on it. But really, you said there's an ice road, and that's how people access some of these places way up here in the north. And we're not far from the Northwest Territories border. 20 miles or less, right?
Yeah, if you're on the north side of the lake, you're 10 miles, 10, 15 miles to the border.
And it's unbelievable how far up here we are. So talk a little bit about your service dates here. When are you here for the entire period? Do you we have a short window to get people to fish, so how do you make the most of it?
Well, typically our season opens June 14th and we run until September 12th. And we get up here. I'm here usually for a good part of the season. I'll come early, open camp, kind of get things ready, and then usually I'll slide home for 5 days and just have a little break there and go and revisit the family and that, and then come back up after that. We just try and keep as many people coming in as we can, because it is, it's that 3-month window, and it's a pretty short window when you look at it all.
Bret, tell me about your first visit here. I know you love it here. I would, if I were to guess, your entire career is based on making sure you can have time to come up north here.
Well, there's a chunk of the summer that's blocked out, when anybody else tries to ask, well, what are you doing this time? Well, there's a good chance I'll be in northern Saskatchewan. This place is neat for a number of reasons. Obviously the big fish, but the scenery, it's so unique. And for anybody that's been to Saskatchewan or been to the southern part of the province, you've got some river valleys and some hills, but for the most part it's pretty flat, a lot of agriculture. And then you get up here in this band across the northern part of the province, it's like a Saskatchewan mountain range. We're not talking about 5,000 foot peaks, but it's these huge rocky hills, and it's just rugged. And I've always described Tazin as being, it's like these hills surrounded like a stadium. So trying to get in here in the winter, if you're not flying in here, you're not getting in here without blazing some sort of trail and bushwhacking your way in,
and crossing a giant lake.
Well, and getting across Athabasca, that's 8th largest lake in Canada. It's a huge body of water. So getting up here in the winter is really tough, and even just there's times where we'll get out of the boat maybe at a shore lunch spot, or if we want to just go out and hike a little bit, it's rugged between the rock and the trees, and even just walking through a lot of sand sometimes you can get a little tired out. So it's rugged country. There's a lot of wildlife around. We've seen a lot of moose again this year. There's black bear around. There was a guest a couple years ago that saw lynx jump into the water and swim around. You don't see stuff like that very often. So it's very remote. So you have the opportunity to see some cool things, catch some big fish, and that remoteness combined with, keeping this camp size small, there's very little fishing pressure. There's some special management regulations on the lake, so there's no commercial netting, huge forage base. It just allows the lake to produce big trophy fish. And it's all catch and release on the big ones. Nobody takes any of these home for trophies or trophy mounts or anything like that. So it really allows you to have a special fishery. I mean, the people that own it are, I don't really like those guys very much, but no, it's great people. They're family people. You're treated like family and friends when you come up here. In fact,
fast friends.
Trevor's got his family up here right now hanging out. Barry, his family comes up and helps out a lot. He's got his cousin here right now. So it's just, you're welcome here. You feel welcome here. The opportunity for fishing is great, and it's just an epic adventure.
That's pretty funny. You said something that my GoPros didn't like. I don't know what it was.
That's pretty typical. I don't know if I answered your question about my first time up here, but I at least talked about why I like it here.
Well, then give me your first time up here, the trip. I mean, and I want this from each of you guys, but I mean, there's something here that captivates you. I mean, I've just been here a couple days and I totally understand it. But for you, I think for everybody, it's probably something similar, but it's unique in its own self. So your first experience here, we're going to talk about the fish. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the fish, but there's more than that. That's a draw, but when you're here, you realize that's not your number one reason for being here.
Well, so that the reason I got here originally, it's always kind of a neat story because I believe in things happening for a reason a lot of times, and how we ended up coming up here, excuse me, is I was doing a TV show and I was based in Brainerd. And our national sales manager was Greg Kaiser, who worked with Babe Winkleman for a number of years. And Babe was supposed to come up here. And a few ownerships ago here at the lodge ended up closing for a couple of years. So Babe was supposed to come. Lodge was closed, couldn't come. Greg left Babe or whatever happened there, started working for us, and he comes by my desk. I'll never forget this. I'm sitting at my desk, and Greg comes over and kind of leans up against the wall and says, you want to go try to catch a world record lake trout?
You have my attention.
Nah, I'm good. I'll pass on that.
Yeah.
So I ended up coming up for a trip in 2016, and we ended the trip on a mega. It was a 48-inch by 30.5-inch around. So, we don't really weigh the fish too much, and, we don't always measure them. That one we were going to measure because it was a pretty big one, and the estimated weight was somewhere in the mid-50s in there. And the picture hangs on the wall here, and it was just like it was sunset. Like the whole, you couldn't script it for a TV show because it was the last fish of the trip. We'd caught some nice fish, Trevor, and it was kind of funny. We were 3 days in, and we were catching decent fish. And and Trevor would be like, we don't want to show that one on TV or whatever. I'm like, Trevor, I'm trying to make a TV show here. Like, I got to show some of these fish. He's like, we'll get some bigger ones. And all of a sudden, I think on like day 4, and then it was a 7-day trip back then. By the last couple of days, we were hammering them. And the last night, this is my favorite story because there's so much history on this lake. There's a lot of mining and exploration that was done. There's some exploratory mines out there. And I kind of wanted to film one to tell that story, for a TV show. How you go out and get some of the storylines of the lake. And we hadn't done that yet. So the final night, we ate here at the lodge and rolled ourselves down to the dock because you always eat too much. And it was beautiful. I remember that. Sunny. Yeah. The lake was like glass.
Flat calm.
I mean, it was just perfect. And I was like, Trevor, can we just go out? And Lance Tangen, who is our camera guy. And so Lance and I jumped in the boat, and we wanted to go film this gold mine. I can still picture Trevor walking down to the dock with a couple of rods in his hand. And I just, we were done fishing. Normally when you eat, you're done. I mean, guests can go out and fish around the lodge. But normally when you're done for the day for the most part, and you relax here on the deck. And I see him grab a couple of rods, and he's got a little smile on his face. I was like, and he looks at me and sets them in the boat and goes, just in case. So we went and filmed the mine, and then, he's like, let's just go fish for a little bit. And we went out there, and he was trolling a big white flatfish, and I had the old ruby red-eyes, the red-eyed wiggler on, which I'd caught some big lake trout on earlier in the trip. And that lure was something that, my dad had used back. This is like one of my earliest memories of seeing one of those in his tackle box. So I was like, I got to use that.
Ours was a little bigger, though.
Probably. Everything's all the lures are a little bigger up here. And I think you caught one and then caught another one, and I wasn't catching anything. And he's like, hey, I got another one of those flatfish in my tackle box. I'm like, well, always listen to your guide, right? That I dropped that to the bottom of the lake, and as soon as it hit the bottom, I was hooked up with that fish. And brought it in, fought it for 14 minutes, I think it was, something like that, and brought it up and, eyes as big as saucers. Like, holy smokes, that's the biggest fish in my life, and held it up for a picture, put it back, and it was like the perfect ending to the TV. Like, you know how you close on a big fish, you can't you can't script it any better. Like, it just worked out perfect. And he looks at me and goes, "That's probably a good way to end the trip, hey?" Yeah. Yes, it is.
You know, when you're filming any type of TV, hunting, fishing, anything that kind of involves the outdoors, you're at the mercy of nature a lot of times.
For sure.
Spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and the weather can bite you in the butt. The weather, or the conditions, what's part of the spawn the fish are in. Are they coming out of it? Are they going into it? Whatever it is, you have to adapt. You have to roll with the punches. And I think that's what makes the success so much sweeter. If you are trying to present this experience to somebody, that's the whole point. We're here is we want to share the Tazin experience with our viewership at In-Fisherman. And it's easy to talk about it. It's easy to share photos, but really, the TV show won't really do justice to the quality of experience that you have here. We want it to, but you really, if the Great North intrigues you and giant lake trout intrigue you, great people, great food, amazing accommodations, and the most picturesque lake I've ever been on. Like, there is no TV, podcast, photos that will ever get the full experience. And so it is a come here and experience this kind of thing. And I don't really have the type of origin stories that you guys do. I remember hearing about this. Boy, I mean, it would have been 10 or 12 years ago, just knowing that there was this epic lake trout destination. And I caught one lake trout probably 10 years ago on a charter boat in Lake Ontario or something, and 2.5 miles of lead core and a lot of cuss words later, I got about a 24-incher in, and I was like, oh, cool, but to go hand-to-hand combat with these things here it's second to none. It's unbelievable. So, Trevor, you think there's a world record in this lake. You believe that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. What makes it possible?
Well, it's the only lake in Saskatchewan that's never been commercially netted and never can be commercially netted. And that's huge because those nets, they take out a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Not just numbers, but sizes of fish too as well. Our terrain is like no other lake in the province. Deep, this lake is like an ocean. Mm-hmm. There's miles and miles, 300, 400, 500 feet of depths. The deepest spot in the lake is supposed to be 900 feet.
Have you found that spot?
I've never found the 900 yet, but I've been close. I've been in the area here, and we'll keep on looking. And,
I think we've seen 800 or upper 700 or something like that. Yeah. So, and it might make it the deepest lake in Saskatchewan.
No, 894 reindeer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we need to find 900.
But if we're at 900,
we'll yeah, exactly. But we need to find that, take a picture of it, right?
Pull that transducer up to the top of the water.
Another 70 feet, yeah. But that's just a big ravine. But the bait, and you've seen that. You had an opportunity to see that over the last little bit here. I've never seen bait pods like this. It's just sometimes you go for a mile in a bait pod from surface down to the bottom in 110 feet of water. And just the food. That's why so many of these fish have those big fat bellies. It's just they swim around and open their mouths, and bait falls in, and so that combined with the lack of fishing pressure, we really strive towards quality, not quantity here. So that's why we limit our guest size of the lodge at 14 guests at a time. I just believe that those combination of things, and we've caught super slobs. Every year, second year, we catch a super monster that's in that 70-pound or plus class, and that's huge. There's only really, you look at it, there's 4 or 5 lodges in the world that can boast those size of fish.
Right. What is the world record currently? Do we know that?
72 pounds.
70, and that's official.
That's official. Yeah.
And so here, and I think this is what's cool, is you probably have come really close, if not caught a world record here, and it's not going to make the books necessarily. Yeah. And I think that's really adds to the intrigue. I find these fish very mysterious. I love to musky fish, and I, having been a musky junkie for 20 years, it really doesn't, going for hours on end without catching a fish doesn't bother me. Yeah. You usually don't do that here, but when you're hunting great big fish, you're not going to catch a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, sometimes.
Right? Tell me about your best day. Did you get tired of holding fish up? Is it how it is?
I've had a couple days with Bret where I've sat down and said, okay, that's enough, Bret. I don't think I can reel in another one. I think that was like the 8th or 9th one that day.
Wow.
But Bret and I have done a few stints out there over the years where we'll go out for, a 24-hour stint and things like that, where, or 22 hours or whatever the case may be. But
There may be some sleeping in the boat when we do that. Just a little bit, but
He demonstrated it last night.
Hey,
Thought that was
straight to rum.
straight
But,
to rum.
Yeah, but especially back in the some of the years, we only come up for a short window, especially during the COVID years, where
Right.
we only do 6 days or 10 days or whatever, and you want to maximize it. But yeah, as a whole, the fishing can be quite special up here, and it's trophy hunting though. But I couldn't even tell you my best day. There's been so many of them, I just don't know.
Well, I had my best day 2 days ago. Was amazing. We caught 2 great fish. You'll see on In-Fisherman TV in early 2025. But to make that kind of thing happen, you have to have eyeballs and people running cameras and people willing to not fish. And Dan, like, high five.
Yeah.
2 days of running an outboat for us, and just, I don't think he looked bored once. I mean, feet up. He had his seat positioned just right so he could kind of snooze and manage the tiller while
he
we
probably
did our
went
thing.
straight to rim a few
Straight
times.
to rim.
I'm sure he did.
Hopefully it's all
Yesterday,
on
for
film.
sure, it sounded like.
So when you guys are working together to produce content, video, the photos, the stuff that you guys do on a regular basis, I feel like this place almost does it for you. But you still have to be on the ball. What's the secret to making good TV here? Aside from personalities.
Yeah, I don't know. We struggle with the personality
Yeah,
part. I mean,
terrible.
we got to deal with this clown, but
Yeah. Just try to buy
He's
good
pointing at
cameras.
Bret there,
yeah,
not Trevor.
yeah. Yeah, it's such a cool place. It almost does do it for you. And you kind of alluded to it earlier. The videos don't do it justice. This is my 3rd trip here, and on the flight in, I was like, maybe I'll just take it easy. We filmed it every time. And it's like, look at that. I got to film that. Look at that. I got to film that. Look at that. I got to film that every time. And then you get here and it's the same thing, like the hills and it's just a gorgeous place. Fish aside, it's the coolest place I've ever been to. And that's why it wasn't boring to just sit there and run a boat. A lot of people were stuck in a cubicle those couple days that would have traded places with me in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool fish and such a cool place. And then you see the fish and they make grown men make noises they've never made in their lives.
Oh,
You
yeah.
see it for
Yeah.
the first time. It's
Well, in the skies, eh?
Oh, yeah.
That wide open sky and the sunset. That just, you can't get a picture that does that justice, and it's unbelievable. Every night is a different beauty.
What I have found interesting, and I have a tendency, I've reached that point in life where if I'm at home and everything's in order, kids are doing their thing, like I will race to bed. If it's 8 o'clock, I'm like, I can check out, and that's fine. Then I'll wake up at 3:30 and pissed at myself for going to bed so early. But here, during this time of year, you have I don't know, is there 20 hours of daylight, or is it even more than that?
I would think probably still more than that.
Maybe just a hair, yeah.
21 or 20.
Yeah, so you end up staying up late, and I think you can fish for a lot longer. And I feel like I'm sleeping very well despite my short amount of sleep. So you really. Straight to rest.
Straight around.
That's the name of the podcast.
But I haven't been tired. I think that the amount of fresh air, everything you're taking in, like you want to be awake to take in as much of it as possible. And I'm definitely not going to bed at 8 o'clock here.
Oh no.
But
and you're tired. When you get
Yes.
to bed, you're sleeping right away because you're tired. They're long days and that. But yeah, you're straight to rim.
Oh, it's something else. Well, you have your family here. I know that you spend a lot of time. You have a lot of other things that you do to support your family and to stay busy. So talk a little bit about your off season. What do you do in preparation for coming up here?
Well, there's always lists. There's no doubt. There's always things needed, whether it be maintenance or upgrades and things like that. So I keep busy doing that. And Barry and I kind of share the answering the phone and answering the emails and messages, as well as Bret. Bret jumps in there too as well, so it's helpful. Keep busy with that. Just trying to keep things moving forward and growing. We do some couple of shows. The last number of years, we've done the Chicago All Canada show and then the Minnesota.
And we did the Northwest Sports Show.
Northwest Sports Show, yeah. And then we did Milwaukee there, and we're looking to see where else we can reach out and touch. Of course, we're both busy though in the off season. Barry has an outfitting camp in Central Saskatchewan, Trails End Outfitters, and he does bear and deer and fishing. And then I have a safety company on the off season too as well, so I'm quite busy with that. And just trying to keep busy, but keep everything moving forward. So.
Well, you do have a short window to come here.
Yeah.
So when you leave camp, do you kind of write a list of, all right, so next year we have to focus on fixing the roof over here. We got to build this over here. How do you plan for that during the year?
Yeah, I write that list anytime I think of it. And as well I'm up here, the last thing I do is walk around camp and look through, what didn't we get done? What do we need to look at for next year? What parts, materials? Because for us, being fly-in, it takes a lot of planning.
Now, you can't just drive to the lumber company.
No, exactly. You know, we have a pretty good stockpile of stuff that if we have a light plane, we'll bring in extra things that we know we're going to need, you know, consumables. But yeah, it's a lot of planning.
You know, a sawmill would be handy here.
Yeah, we have like an Alaskan sawmill with a chainsaw. And we actually, last number of years, we have been cutting lumber and setting it aside and drying it. You know, because there's some beautiful trees up here. You know, where we are on our island, it's probably one of the few spots around the lake that has never burned. So we got, it partially burned one year, but we got some beautiful timber back in. And yeah, that's kind of on the plan. You
have to be a jack of all trades. You have to be capable of construction, electrical, plumbing, you know, people skills. You're obviously great with that. So that you have to be able to handle projects, and especially at short notice with limited resources.
Absolutely.
Do you find that a fun part of the challenge?
Oh, absolutely. You know, absolutely. I'm kind of fortunate.
Say that now.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate that you know, I've experienced a lot of that in my life and come from a varied background, so it comes a little bit easier. Some people struggle with it, but you know, you can. But as long as you got a guy, you know what I mean, or have and today's world with YouTube, oh my gosh,
you learn a lot.
You can learn anything you need to, and having, you know, just like a number of support systems in place for friends. And
I was going to say, you know, your guides are well rounded too.
Yes.
The guys that stay here, they're capable of. They don't just run the boat and catch fish and know how to find fish. They're talented in other ways here that kind of probably contribute to the camp maintenance.
Absolutely, especially carpentry skills. You know, some mechanical skills. All those things are pretty key factors. And you know, all of our guides were fortunate that way where they do. And you know, one of our guides I've guided with for over 30 years. You know, and that's my background. I've been guiding forever. Trained as a game warden and a biologist, but love the guidance side of it. And,
game warden?
Yeah.
He'd have been a scary game warden.
Because I'm so easygoing.
I have a good friend that's a game warden, so I understand a little bit of the lifestyle. But really, you need to make sure that this thing functions when you're here. You have a short window to make the most of your time. But really, granted, you have the entire experience that makes this what it is, but these fish are so special. Let's talk a little bit about if somebody's going to come here. I brought stuff. I've got it sitting around here somewhere that I didn't need to bring. I have a problem with that, and you know,
everybody does.
Everybody likes to bring their own gear, but talk about what if you're going to bring one tray of stuff. You guys tell me what your favorite baits are. That flatfish seems to be top of the list.
Yeah, flatfish are pretty key. The T60 flatfish, you know, rubber baits, a bunch of the different rubber baits, especially the Savage, live target. We have some great success on live target, you know, and anything big in rubber. But some spoons too as well. You know what I like to tell customers though is don't bring too much gear. You get a 50-pound weight limit, and that doesn't mean you have to bring 50 pounds either. You know what I mean? But we have a great supply of tackle. We have good quality rods and reels and equipment for you to use. You know, and don't bring a whole bunch of stuff because most times
you don't use it.
You don't use it. It sits in your cabin. You know. I tell everybody, you really like your reel, bring your reel. That's great. And haul your rod if you want, or haul your rods if you want. But we've brought all this stuff in so you don't have to haul that stuff through the airport. You know, and it makes it easier, better, and then your gear doesn't get damaged. Like you send it on some of these flights, you see what happens over the years,
or they don't show up,
Right? Yeah. I got lucky. Yeah. Mine did show up the next day, but I planned an extra day. When you and I talked, that was a good idea. It turned out to be right. I flew out of Minneapolis, went to Calgary, and then from Calgary to Fort Mac, and then Fort Mac to here. But that first leg of the trip was I ended up in Fort Mac and spent the night in a hotel there, and then had plenty of time to get to McMurray Aviation to hop on a float plane to come here. So I think it's smart, plan ahead, add an extra day, especially if there's weather conditions. You know, often there's fires or there's storms moving through, and that does limit how float planes can and do leave. So adding an extra day is pretty important. But your top bait, Bret, what are you going to use?
Yeah, and you know, honestly, the travel here is one of the most. It's probably the hardest part of this trip, but that's what makes it so special. You know, if it was easy to get to, or if there'd be a lot more anglers here, the fishing probably wouldn't be as good. And to me, you just take your time and plan for a little bit of extra time on the front and back end of this trip, and it's and make the trip part of the event. You know, make that travel part of the adventure. I enjoy it. We drive it and bring the dogs. It's a lot of fun.
Well, we're probably the most remote lodge in Saskatchewan. You know, we're up tucked into the corner and away from everything. You know.
And just if I can just sidetrack for 1 second, I'll tell you about the baits. But Trevor talked about this lodge being open in the 50s, and I was telling you, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet, but on our website or on the Tazin Lake Lodge website, there's a link to a Popular Mechanics article.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned this.
And in 1962, they had an outdoor rider. So at one point, Popular Mechanics had an outdoor rider, probably for a number of years, I don't know. But they sent that rider here to fish the finest spot in North America for lake trout. And back in the 60s, Uranium City, which is, 25 air miles or so, 20 air miles, it was bustling because the mining operations were huge up here back then. So there was
8,000 people, I think.
and how many are there now? 20?
21
50?
or something, 26.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was it was a boom, right? It was bustling, and a lot of those guys were coming over here to fish. So there was a lot of activity here. So this lodge was booming back then as well, and so that you'll see when you walk around camp, you'll see little pieces of history and how far it goes back here. So it's just the story of this lodge to me, and it's one of the oldest still operating lodges in Saskatchewan, as well as one of the most remote. Yeah. So
how did in the 50s? How did they discover or determine this to be at that time a top lake trout destination? I mean, imagine that.
Started catching them.
Started catching
big ones.
And then it's all word of mouth, though. It's not like a guy posted on Facebook. That's right. This Tazin Lake trout I caught,
Yeah, right.
So,
well, and when
There's
I
no
first
YouTube.
guided, when I first got it up here in 05, I got an email from the original owners who built the lodge, from the son of the original owners, and Vince Puller, his name was, and he actually had gave me all kinds of info, and just said, hey, this, just so you know, this is this and that, and had told me about the history and different things, and it was very interesting. It's like, oh, awesome. And he said back in them days, they had a weekly TV show in Minneapolis. Back in the 60s or 70s, that they had running down there, and all for the reel-to-reel stuff and that stuff. And he said he had a whole garage full of those reels, hey?
We would love to watch those, by the way, if anybody's listening.
Hey, I tried. He aged out, and ended up, he passed a few years ago, and he, I don't know.
I can't imagine, I mean, we chose to do this trip without bringing an additional camera guy. Bret and Dan's talent behind the camera and in front of the camera, we were able to make this happen. I think the way that In-Fisherman needs to have it happen. But you really, if you look back, you think about maybe they were a little more liberal with weight limits, or there was opportunities for people to bring in different gear, whatever. But those older cameras are not light.
Yeah.
And the film, and I mean, if there's reels of film, then they had to bring those reels of film with them here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then take that back and cut it and tape it, and that's the cutting room floor. You hear about that kind of mentioned once in a while, where they were manually putting tape together. I can't. That doesn't compute. I don't even know what that means.
Razor blades and grease pencils. Yeah. At least that's the way we did it on the radio side of things. But there's no SD cards back then. I don't think.
Right. But what's interesting though is that it's still world class. This has been on the map for. Well, what are we? If you say in the 50s and 60s, years. I mean, it's a long time. So you keep the pressure down. But what's also intriguing to me is there's no mapping, really extensive mapping. This lake is much bigger than you realize, and you just have to spend time on the water to find spots.
Absolutely.
And you've said this to me. I find this a very intriguing part of this trip is where we spend our time. You said it might be the best lake trout spot on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like a perfect storm of structure, flow, bait, and depths. That there's a lot of different places you can catch big lake trout on this lake, but it seems like that has every element that a lake trout likes. From where they like to hang out, where they like to rest, where they like to eat. It just seems like it's the perfect combination of all those things.
Was that a spot that you found, or was it shown to you? Did you know it was here?
I was shown it by a guide or other guides. They told me from previous owner. They gave me an area. That wasn't that exact spot that they said, but it was in the area, and of course just fine tuning. I believe that. We found the spot on the spot in a number of those spots out there as compared to general areas now, and we could see that. And it's
once we started mapping.
That mapping. Nowadays it's unbelievable to be able to fine tune and see. Okay,
breaking
this
ground.
Is why. Yeah, back in my day, my finder had about 300,000 waypoints on it. And that's when we follow lines on the waypoints, and then I start mapping. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's what it is.
It was mind-blowing when we had the map, because I fished here I started coming here in 16, and then we didn't really map it until maybe 19 or 21 or something.
Well, we kind of started, but the initial
it was a bit of a
weren't quite there,
struggle right away. But man, once we got a good comprehensive look at what's under the water in some of these spots, it's like, oh my God. I mean, you look at the hills and the rocky ledges and things like that.
Yeah, it's got to look like that underneath everything.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's just rugged. It's the same kind of ruggedness, Well, and what's funny is 2 days ago, I found a new spot.
Yeah, well,
regularly, especially in this expanse, because there's this deep bowl, but there are spots that come up shallower, And so every time I go somewhere, I take a little different path. I'm trying to just grid it, but you can't. There's only so many hours in a season. But found a new spot a couple of days ago, and it's like, after this podcast, that's where I'm going to go check out. I never got a chance to fish it, but I mapped it,
Do you set aside time to explore?
Every day.
I feel like
every day, as a guide, whether I'm guiding or not. Every single day, there's an hour, or half an hour or 2 hours. Depends on the client too, right? And depends on fishing. If we whack a bunch of monsters and all of a sudden, okay, good, we've met the goals of what the client set for the trip, well, then a lot of times they'll say, yeah, let's go check some things out.
It's amazing how you almost take a step back in time here. There is a little bit of modern technology that you can add to the list, the different mapping options you have within the units, the Humminbird Auto Chart Live or Lowrance and Garmin both have versions of that. And if you're plugging that into certain spots, it opens your eyes and you're able to be more accurate with your presentation. And I still feel like, though, you're very productive with not what you would call modern equipment. You can still have a very productive outing. You don't need a fiberglass bass boat with a trolling motor and 250 horses. That'd be fun, but I mean, you don't need that to be successful here.
No, absolutely, yeah. The modern equipment helps lots.
Yeah, if you want to fly that boat in, by the way,
I
think we'll take it.
Yeah,
we love that. We don't need it.
That'd be a big helicopter.
You can use it anytime you come up if you want.
Okay. I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've mentioned it a couple times when it goes glass calm like this, you just love to just pedal to the floor and go. But the other thing is the maps don't indicate a rock that might be just 2 inches under the surface. You got to know.
The one I found the other day, a couple days ago, that was a hitter. Absolutely.
And Trevor can speak to this more than I can, but you don't just take into account what boats and motors you have up here, but you have to take into account your fuel supply and how much fuel you can get up here. So you put one of those big motors up here and you're burning through so much more fuel every day. Right. All of a sudden your cost goes up. You got to fly that fuel in. Like everything has to come in by airplane here. So you have to, Trevor and I, a lot of times we'll sit on the deck here after everybody's gone to bed and just brainstorm things like, what can we do? What can we do for this? What can we do for this? How can we do this? And a lot of it, you still have to funnel through that filter of, will it fit on a caravan? Will it fit in the plane to get in here? And what's that plane cost? And can we do it with guests? Can we do it empty? There's so much that you would like to do, and you can still only do what that plane allows you to do.
Logistically wise, absolutely. Or you go to a bigger plane, bigger cost,
spending more money,
more stuff, and
So you almost have you probably have 2, 3, 4, 5 year plans of, we can only do so much in a given season because you have a short window, you have annual expenses, you kind of have to keep everything in mind. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess a dream improvement that you would like to make here. What is something that you would do to change something here?
Oh, the list never stops.
I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, everything. Like more cabins, a couple more fancier cabins, I love the lodge. It's great.
So comfortable.
So few more boats for flyouts. I would really like to open our flyouts eventually. We've had, and we do the odd little dabble into them and that stuff. We have a number of flyouts that haven't been fished for a decade or more.
Gosh,
some of them have been
imagine?
2 decades, or almost 2 decades. Wow, that's a lot of time. Those fish are growing. That's for sure, So, and they're all in a circle right close to the main lake here. A lot of times we find that you just, fishing can be good enough. Early spring is when the flyouts really go well, because of course they warm up so fast. You know, as for our big lake, it's a big basin. It takes longer to warm up. You know, so.
Do you fly this plane out here?
No, I don't fly that plane, but Barry flies that.
Barry does,
so,
yeah.
And he's a commercial pilot. Barry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's you don't see it right now, but there's a float plane outside just tied up against the shore, and it kind of gives a little bit more of the camp ambiance. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You have two forms of well, three forms of travel here. Your feet, if you want to walk around the island, you got the 16-foot aluminum boats with, are they 25 horse Yamis on
25 four-stroke Yamis.
Yep.
Spring right seats, Cassidy decks, floaters, all that. Yeah.
And then there's an airplane.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering where that could go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we use it for some supplies, you know, but of course safety factor too as well. That if we need to, you know, and Barry's pretty in tune with that, and he loves flying. That's his passion is flying. So yeah, it's good.
You know, there was a time I wanted to be a bush pilot, and honestly, I think I'd still like to do that. But this is that is one of my favorite parts of this experience, and I've never done a fly-in before this trip.
Oh, really?
I've worked in the fishing business for almost 20 years. This is the first time I've done a fly-in, and it was like, you know, high school girl grin the whole time, and it was so much fun.
Absolutely.
That's a neat flight in too. You know, I mean, you see a lot of those, like Saskatchewan's got almost 100,000 lakes, and most of them are up in the north. So you're flying over kind of that northeast corner of Alberta, northwest corner of Saskatchewan, and it's just nothing but, you know, you see some of that oil and gas and the energy development and exploration, but then you start flying over all these lakes, and you start to look down and say, gosh, I wonder if somebody stepped on that piece of land right there.
Same thing. I wondered about how many moose I flew over.
Oh goodness, yeah.
But you fly over Athabasca, and then you kind of
giant desert in the middle of
I'm
Canada.
curious about that.
66 miles long.
Do you know do you have any understanding of the history of the sand dunes and what that is?
Well,
that's on the southeast side of Athabasca, correct?
My understanding, that's like the old lake bottom, and the edge of that. As Athabasca got shallower and shallower over the years in the sand, the wind pushes up, the wave action pushes it up, and
It's a national park?
Yeah, provincial park.
Provincial park?
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, Athabasca.
We didn't fly right over it, but you could see it. And I was kind of checking out my but you do have cell service halfway here.
Yeah, actually quite a ways, eh? Yeah. It works pretty good. Well, and they're actually doing a video, or they're doing a film and a movie over at the Sand Dunes right now. Dunes 2, eh?
Oh, really?
Dunes 2. Right?
No kidding.
Yeah.
What?
That's filmed here?
Well, at this year, because of course with what's going on in Russia and all that stuff in the Middle East, they Athabasca Sand Dunes. They just started right now.
The
Dune,
Dune 2.
big
The
movie
Hollywood production.
Yeah, number 2. Right now it's happening.
Wow.
Number 2 or number 3?
It'd be number 3, probably.
Number 3,
because
then.
number 2 came out this year. But
Okay,
that's
sure, number 3 then.
No kidding.
Can you imagine Hollywood stars coming
All
up
right,
here?
let's get Barry's plane going. Let's go fly over and
you
check it
have my
out.
attention.
But then you come over Athabasca and talk about what the topography looked like.
Well, so as we were coming to that, one of the things that's always intrigued me, of course, I love Canada, I love the North, I love these lakes, but there's if you were to draw a line from, it's Great Bear, is that the furthest north?
Yeah.
Okay, Great Bear, Great Slave, Athabasca, and then it goes down, like you can draw a line, a straight line almost, through the lakes, down into Winnipeg, and then the Great Lakes. And it just, if you're intrigued by geography and the age of our planet and how the ice age formed what it formed, you have these enormous bodies of water that were created by a giant glacier.
Absolutely.
And all the way down to Lake Ontario, into the St. Lawrence River and out. But these waters they're spectacular, they're rugged, they're enormous. I mean, you couldn't see across Athabasca from the airplane when we're coming up to it. You get in the middle of it and you're like, I think I can see the shore back that way. I don't know what I can see over there. But your mind just goes to what's swimming in that water, and we're flying right over that. Like that's not even a pit stop, and headed to Tazin. So, and then as we're in the middle of Athabasca, the plane starts to descend. You can just you're starting to see waves a little bit. You're starting to see a little bit of a texture on the water, and you're starting to see the northern shoreline of that lake. And then as we're flying into camp, you could start to see the shadow on the sides of the hills of the plane. So you know that if we were over there, we'd be in the dirt.
Yeah.
But the pilot had a cut through a drainage on the south side of the lake. I believe it came in from over here.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, I don't know if this is by design, But it was a standing ovation for me. As we came in, he pointed out, the camp's on that island, and then he did this real sharp bank as he came around, and I was just like, that was the culmination of the arrival. Now, the adventure that's here starts with the adventure of getting here. And that might start in whatever airport you're in and lugging too much gear around because you can't follow directions and pack only 50 pounds. But when you finally touch down on the water with a float plane, like, you know that you are no longer in civilization. You have the anticipation of lifetime memories just waiting for you here. Like I said, it's been not a decade, but within a decade I heard of this place, and to finally be here and be a part of what happens was my two favorite, I'm not kidding, my two favorite Canadian experiences really might be just outdoor favorite experiences in general happen in Saskatchewan.
Awesome.
I shot a whitetail in Saskatchewan
Nice.
12 years ago, and now this, like, these are top memories I'm going to have for the rest of my life, because there's nothing like this anywhere else.
I love it.
It's hard to compare anything else you see, with here.
I know generally what it takes to make this happen, but I mean, you're providing these memories for people. I'm a writer. I love to share memories. I want people to be more successful, and in a similar way, you're wanting people's trip here to be successful. You want them to go home with a full heart, and I think it, your work shows, but it happens naturally because of the kind of person you are, the way that you care about people. I mean, right away, I was like, man, this guy's he's easy to get along with. He's friendly, and I could tell the stories were there about what's happened here, but people come and go, but they never forget this kind of place. And you're going to be a central part of that memory for a lot of people.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I get, messages, texts. So we get all kinds of notes and stuff from clients saying, "Oh, I sure miss it," and this happened in my life, but I'll be back next year. I got a 3-year plan, things like that. But yeah, it's pretty neat to be a part of that memory with a lot of people too as well, and have that experience together.
Let's go back into the fishing. We're going to talk about that. And Dan, I know you spent some time yesterday by yourself taking a nap, but also fishing. One of the things, I don't know if it's very new here for you guys, but there is some vertical jigging that seems to be working. Is that a new technique here, or has that been going on for a while?
We've vertically jigged off and on. This year it seems to be working better than we've had successes in other years. You know what I mean? It is a later year though. This year the ice went off late. From the season and everything, we're probably 2 weeks behind. Okay. From what we see water temperature wise, and we never had a really big warm up. A lot of times we get a big stretch of 80+ degree weather.
That's coming, I think.
A couple weeks. It's coming.
Today,
but
did you just say it in Fahrenheit?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Don't they make you renounce your citizenship if you...
I do need that Celsius conversion.
It took a long time, Brett, but I'm getting there.
Yeah. So one of the things, Dan is very good with electronics and understands the forward-facing sonar. So we do have some of that here, and you're able to kind of apply that. You're seeing reactions from fish. You caught 3 yesterday jigging?
Yeah, I just spent a little bit of time in kind of an action spot, so they weren't big fish, but had basically walleye gear. Spinning rod, spinning reel, medium lightish, with actually like a Cast Lake special big nasty glow jig that you use for eel pout, and just dropped that down there and watch lake trout. It's so fun to watch them. They're such an aggressive fish, and to just watch them chase that bait and chase it and miss it, and then finally it hits it, and it's like a walleye on steroids. It's at the surface, and all of a sudden you're 60 feet down, and you got to try to bring it all the way back up. And it's a 5 pound laker.
That's awesome.
And we're spoiled here that 5 to 10 pound lakers are action fish.
Yes.
Right? Catch one of those in the States, and you're like, oh,
I'm putting that on the wall.
Yeah.
Explain that. So this is a term I've learned since I've been here. There's action fish, and then there's the great big ones we're chasing. What is the difference?
It's basically smaller fish you can find, and
they're abundant.
Yeah, you can just about troll any shoreline right now and catch action lake trout, small lake trout, and the bigger ones seem to be kind of hold up. We've talked about it. It's almost like there's 2 different strains. I don't know that for sure, but we've kind of
like Superior would have a couple of different ones, leans, Cisco-wets, things like that.
Just doing different things, hanging out in different spots, and we've caught lakers in 2 feet of water here, and swampy, boggy stuff. Trying to cast throwing a Nessie, trying to catch a pike, and all of a sudden a lake trout comes out of nowhere. That's fun. Then you can find these deeper holes in some of these spots too, and just watch them school up on live scope or whatever forward-facing sonar you want.
It's kind of a contradiction of technology for just rugged area, rugged experience, but you kind of have this modern technology. The exploration never stops, it seems. So you're learning more about that, and I'm hopeful this afternoon we're going to get out and go do some of this action trout thing, because that sounds like a lot of fun. So you don't need to catch a giant fish every day. If you want to go and catch some numbers, you can do that as well. And the pike fishing, we haven't even talked about that yet.
And that action trout stuff, and we call them action here, but back home these are the trout you're targeting most of the time. And you're pretty happy to catch, and you don't need forward facing sonar up here. You don't. And in fact, we started out sharpshooting these fish on 2D.
2D's king up here.
It has a place for sure.
100. It's just that forward facing sonar is a lot of fun. But you don't need it. And being walleye guys from Minnesota, being able to come up here with the walleye gear and jig for these smaller sized lake trout,
still pretty nice.
It's so much fun because they fight so hard, and if you can see them on your electronics, they will chase 40 feet sometimes, and then they might miss it. And I've always said that, I'm no biologist, but I've always said that lake trout don't have the greatest eyesight. They're relying more on smell or on feel, vibration. So they'll miss. But anytime I'm in a boat with somebody like, I missed them, just keep doing what you were doing, because they will come back. A lot of times anyway, they'll come back and hit it again.
Well, I watched that first day we were together. You did catch a lake trout middle of the day back in a bay that, it was in the speed that it moved through the water. It was like a rocket, and it was zing, 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 and it finally got your bait, but it had missed it quite a few times before it kind of got that figured out. But
and I think we are behind right now, so they're just a hair lethargic. So sometimes you got to slow things down a little bit, or downsize, or just give them that extra second to try to come up and hit that thing. The way you describe that lake trout, that sometimes people describe pike like that, and that's one thing that's sometimes overlooked here. And that first trip that I took up here in 2016, in Minnesota, you can catch some 40 inchers.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, there's not a ton of them. And if a lake's got them, there's not very many in that lake. There's places to do it, but I'd caught one, and that was actually the Canadian side of Lake of the Woods prior to coming up here. And that first year, Trevor and I went, and we did a lot of sight fishing. In this, when you ask me what I like about this place, and as somebody that carries a camera a lot and does a lot of underwater stuff, the fact that I can run an inline camera down 60 feet and get clear enough water on a sunny day to be able to get strikes and hookups with lake trout. I freak out being able to film. The filming opportunities with the clear water is unreal. And we sight fish, and I think I caught 8 pike over 40 inches that first year, in a week's time up here. So I went my whole life catching 1 over 40 back home, and came up here and caught a handful. Now that was a really good trip. So I'm not going to tell you that you can come up here and catch that many over 40, but the opportunity to do that is there. The fish are here,
and they don't stop at 40 inches.
No, that year Trevor and I even doubled on 40 plus. We both hooked up at the same time. They're both over 40. And then in 21, when you asked Trevor what his best day was, this is one of the best days that I can remember. We've had some good ones, but there was camp was closed during COVID, so there wasn't a lot of pressure on here, and we were able to come up and kind of check things out. And there's a video of it. Trees were down when we came into camp. There was a lot of water. Water was high. There was a lot of work to be done, but we managed to get a little bit of fish over there. And I caught a 50-inch pike.
Oh my goodness!
And I didn't even know 50-inch pike existed before I started traveling up here. And I saw Trevor catch a 51.5 back in 18, I think it was, something like that. And the biggest pike I've ever seen, obviously, in my life. The head on the thing was, the size of one of my dogs. And it was huge. And then we caught that 50 in 21, and then went out and lake trout fished. And it must have been 10 to 15 that were over 44 or 45 inches.
It was crazy.
We had 2 boats, and I was filming. I wasn't even fishing because everybody kept reeling in fish, and I had to film it. As soon as I dropped down, I'd hear the other boat start screaming, and we'd have to reel up and rip over there and film this guy catching a lake trout. And Trevor would just troll over there, and then he'd hook up as we were driving over there.
That's wise.
So, some days you have to put in your time.
Yeah.
As you've seen, some days it's a grind out there, and some days it can happen just like that.
But I know that dropping a bait down and catching a fish every cast, that sounds great, but knowing that it's going to happen soon keeps you on the edge of your seat. You just knew it was going to happen at any moment, and it took us a day to knock into those real, the really nice. I think we caught 2.5 an hour, and if we weren't filming, I think we probably could have kept going and kept catching fish. But we had certain elements of the TV show we needed to wrap up. But you're right. You have the opportunity at a world record class lake trout, And then on top of that, you've got a reasonable opportunity at a 50-inch northern pike, which is anybody that loves Esox fish, that is a bucket list item that very few people will ever catch. But they live here.
Yeah. Oh, definitely they live here. Yeah. And that's top of the food chain when it comes to pike. That's for sure, you know. Yeah.
Dan got his personal best this year?
Smashed it, yeah.
How big?
45 and a half.
Oh, man.
So
was that the other day?
Was.
Yeah, it was
on the Nessie?
On the Nessie.
Nessie.
Dude.
Yeah, that's a fun bite.
It
when
is.
you see him move water and you're like, oh, that looked decent. And even, you know, I was apprehensive when the fish was coming in to say, oh, that's even a 40. Just because you don't want to be the guy who says that on camera.
Oh,
It's like
Trevor.
35. We've all done that.
We've done that, yeah.
But mid to high forward.
I think that might be
Especially
the 40s.
29.
I have been known to big eye fish. Yes, I need reeled in a time or two.
But
So
then you see the width of these fish.
They're
It's
just
so
well-built.
impressive.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
what's the
They
forage
eat well.
primary forage base here?
Cisco's and burbot.
Yeah.
Yeah, whitefish. We also have deep water sculpin, and I've been taking them out of some of the bellies of the fish. We always cut the belly open when we're cooking shore lunch to see what they're eating. You know, early spring this year, all the Lakers were full of leeches. Tons and tons of tiny, 2.5, 3 inch leeches, just a skinny little tiny leech, but the belly's right full, and that kind of shows how the forage as it primes up. Starting out with that, where everybody's starving. Now we're starting to see those huge bait pods in, and that, and well, as the lake warms up, right?
So let's see, what's a big Cisco?
2 pounds.
Great question.
Yeah, a couple pounds, I
Yeah,
suppose.
well, it's world record. Cisco was caught in Saskatchewan ice fishing this year. I just seen an article on it yesterday. 7 pounds 7 ounces.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, and
Jeez.
7.2 was the previous record from I think down somewhere in the States.
Well, it'd be safe to assume there's probably fish bigger than that in this lake.
maybe.
Well, I mean,
Another
there's been some
opportunity.
whitefish seen or caught
Yeah.
that were 29 inches.
Yeah, 12, 14 pounders. Yeah, lake
And-
whitefish.
And then last year there was a burbot caught that was, the burbot was 20.
That was
Burbot
last
was
year.
29.
Burbot was 29,
Yeah,
whitefish was 28 maybe or something like that.
10, 12 pounders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty. It's interesting to think about that. So you always just assume, there's perch and walleyes all over.
Yeah, no.
And
no
they do
percolates.
stop before they get this far. So I mean, that's intriguing.
Yeah, this whole strip of the province, all the way across along the Northwest Territories border, it's a high point of land, and the walleyes and perch and that just never could get in. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they have plenty to eat. And the interesting thing is and pike are known for this. Muskies the same. They
They'll eat
cannibalize.
themselves.
Yep.
100%.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that moves.
Lake trout too, you think?
Oh,
Both apex.
anything.
Well, the fish that you caught for the show, we noticed the other day. Someone pointed out that it's missing a pectoral fin.
Yeah, that was wild.
And not a stalker. Like, let's be clear, that fish is not
no
put in
stalking
here.
here.
But maybe that's an indication of the aggressive lifestyle of these things.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, and it looked so perfect. It's almost like it wasn't even there because when you look at the picture, it doesn't look like there's
a little mark.
Is there? Eh?
But yeah,
must happen young then.
But I didn't know. Well, to be fair, I was looking at the back of the fish
Yeah,
the entire
sure. Yeah,
time,
yeah.
so I didn't notice it right away until we saw the picture. But everything else on that fish looked pretty good, and we've seen. If you think about the environment that those big lake trout are living in down there at 80, 100 feet, it's rocky, it's dark, there's some moving water, and there's other fish bigger than them down there.
Yeah.
So if they're living, some of these fish might be 60, 70, 80 years old.
sure.
You think so?
Think
even
about
longer.
I mean the
Freezing cold
growing
water.
season is really short.
Yeah.
Trevor caught on the pike side of things. Trevor caught a 51 incher a couple years ago. 4 days after the 51 and a half. That was unreal. Unreal. But he caught that fish, and I took a picture, of course, and we looked at the picture, and something triggered in your mind, like, that
It had
looks
a scar.
familiar.
Had a scar on its side.
That you recognized.
Yeah.
And when you had caught it before.
It took me all winter to figure out where it was, and I come upon the picture, and I was like, oh, yeah. It was a 47 incher, 47 and a half, and it was 6 years before. Is that what we
I think it
figured,
was.
Brett?
I think it
5
grew
or 6
4
years.
inches in 5 years,
Yeah.
which is actually I was actually surprised at how fast
Yeah.
that one grew. But
How close to the location were you, the two locations when you caught the fish?
100 yards.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so they are home bodies.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen that in the States or in musky waters. You often catch the same fish because they prefer certain areas. It doesn't always happen.
Well, it's a perfect
but-
habitat.
Yeah, right.
And I think that with some of these areas, you have a resident fish that live there, and then you have cruisers that just follow shoreline and cruise, or out following bait, and then cruise come in there to warm up or chase something in.
And I caught a lake trout last year in a spot, and it actually had a jig in its mouth.
That's right.
So I caught it. It was a action sized lake trout, so whatever, a few pounds. and I caught it on a T60 flatfish. So we're talking about one of the smaller size lake trout eating, big, aggressive 6-inch, or 5-6-inch bait, whatever it is. And it had a jig in the corner of its mouth. And I think about a week earlier, somebody else was jigging. It was 1.5 miles away on the lake and broke off. And when I showed him the jig, he's like, "Oh yeah, that's one of my jigs."
Can I have that back, please?
That doesn't happen very often.
These fish eat like crazy.
They eat like crazy, and I think the Lakers tend to cruise probably more than the pike do.
Follow
but
the bait,
they cruise around quite a bit.
Well, it's interesting that main spot that we spent so much time on, you did not go 2 boat lengths without going over a giant cloud of bait that sometimes span from just a few 10, 15 feet below the boat to the bottom.
Yeah.
And in very deep water. So these are mysterious monsters of the deep. I mean, you believe these fish can live to be 50, 60, 70 years old?
Yeah, I believe they live to be 100 years old.
Yeah.
When you got this cold water, you see surface temperatures warm up, but down in the water, down deep, it doesn't warm up.
Right.
I believe they could probably almost live indefinitely if they got lots of food and they're just hanging out.
Nothing's eating them.
Nothing's eating them. Yeah, when they're the apex, top of the food chain.
Like the biggest trout I've ever caught was I pulled 27 inches of regurgitated lake trout out of that fish's mouth. That's just what I measured. It was
like
partly
Garfield,
digested, and that's just what I measured.
insane. And he's still eating.
Yeah.
That's a PB size for a lot of people back home.
And I pulled it out of the mouth of this fish. It was unbelievable.
But that just shows those bite windows too. When stuff happens and it's rocking, like they fill their belly, rock and roll, fill the belly, and then go from there. So,
what's also interesting to me is we got something ringing around here, huh?
It sounds like a FaceTime or something. It might be Barry sent me a message on the old InReach there, so it might be Barry trying to contact
they
us
live?
about something.
tell you the bite's on.
They need something for shore lunch. So.
Beans?
We got
Please
a
tell me it's the
monster.
beans. Please tell me he forgot the beans.
We'll get into that before too long. I'm not ready to be done with this, but interestingly, you can catch these fish on a few different presentations, and you have the jigging, you have the trolling options. Let's talk a little bit about the jigging presentation. So you are needing to get down deep. A lot of times, I think I felt like 60 feet was shallow for where we were trolling, and one of your favorite baits up here has been that Savage Gear burbot.
Oh yeah, that's been a good one, and that's a lot of times. There's a couple of different sizes, but a lot of times we're using that bigger size or maybe the middle size there.
12-inch or whatever.
Yeah, and to see these fish just come up and just whack it, it's really good because obviously that's a big forage base for them here.
Yeah.
So it's I know a couple of years ago we tried a line through trout from Savage, and it caught some fish, and then we had some guests come up that were big Savage guys from Colorado, and they brought a box full of those line through. There was like the line through trout, like the silver one, and then the orange one, and a couple of other ones. And they started catching lots. We're like, oh, and then I think I came up one year and you're like, oh, look what I found, and you shook it, and that little tail that just twirled a little bit, and like, oh, interesting, and smashed.
Oh, yeah.
So it's been a good lure for us up here for sure.
Yeah. And you forward that with, we had 12 ounces of weight. Two, you called them banana weights, so we had 2 of them together in between a pair of swivels, and it's almost like a giant Carolina rig.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're dragging that in the bottom, and that bait is, I think that leader was 35 to 40 inches in length, and
fluorocarbon.
And the glow thing is interesting. Rylan, our guide, said that he believes that glow color is the best thing down there. It makes sense. They're so deep. I imagine the light is very limited, but those things have an ability to see that, I would imagine, to some extent. So glow tubes, the flatfish in a white glow. So
certain times, certain times. Other times it's a bright chartreuse. Like there's windows.
It seems like every year
season.
it's a different color.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it definitely is where you can just, they work amazing. A certain color, and all of a sudden the next year is a different color, right?
And for the most of the part, you're using standard trolling gear. We brought up an 8'6" Fenwick medium moderate, heavy moderate action rod, so a musky trolling rod with a line counting reel. I think that was pretty important to be able to replicate and get your bait in the right area. But you also want to feel. So I think if you're using like a casting, a double X heavy casting rod, you're not going to feel that bait or the weights bumping the bottom as well. And those moderate rods, the parabolic rods, really kind of allow you to keep in contact with the bottom. That seemed to be critical.
Absolutely, yeah. And something with a really good sturdy backbone, but a soft tip.
Yeah.
That soft tip is key to holding that hook in there, especially with that much line out and those weights on,
Right.
to maintain that, a good hard hook set. And then just an easing back, a little
just
bit
one
of
hook
loosening
set?
of the
Yeah,
drag.
Brett.
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 depends on the deal, hey. But yeah, easing back on that drag a little bit too as well, so that they're not allowed opening up that hole.
Well,
and drop that hook out.
when you get to a place like this, and if you're not familiar with the fishing, you do want to ask, well, what's the bite feel like? And
Sure.
most of the time is you'll know. That's the answer you get, and that was true to the T. And when I hooked up on the nice one that I caught, like, it literally slowed the boat down.
Yeah.
Well, and then once we kill it and like put it neutral or shut the engine off, it's dragging the boat around.
Yeah.
It's cool, so awesome when you get to vertically.
So
there, they're
much
just pushing
power.
it all over.
Yeah, the other day we were trying to film you guys. You had one hooked up, and we'd pull up to you guys, and all of a sudden, you're going that way, and fire up the motor, try to get back around, and not using a trolling motor, the fish is pulling you around. It's cool.
It's interesting. I've jigged with the tubes, and it seems like it's almost a little bit of a lighter bite with it sometimes. And that we've jigged with some heavier, like, hair jigs, glow jigs, and I've had them just come up. I remember that one day, one night, whatever, we were out there fishing and dropped down, and we could see it screaming up on 2D. I mean, 60 feet from the bottom, that fish already knew the jig was coming. That was a heavy jig.
Yeah.
That was a big heavy one.
That's testament to their senses, though.
They knew it was coming, and and the water's so clear, and it was glow.
And it was dark. Though.
And it was dark.
We were fishing, night fishing.
So it's like a light bulb just sinking down to him.
Yeah.
And he came screaming up. I caught 2 that night, and the first one, he came up and hit it so hard the rod almost came out of my hands. And then the second one, he hit it twice, and I missed him, and he still came back. And I think we estimated that one to be in the upper 40-pound range.
Yeah.
So hooking into a fish that big, and setting the hook on it 3 times, feeling that thump 3 different times, like there's been nothing else like it for me.
Well, and then it grabs it and runs straight to the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, and that was a 12-ounce jig. Do you remember
That was a 12-ounce jig. Yeah, that was a
jig.
heavy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even think you had a tail or anything on it. That was just a jig head, a glow jig head.
glow
right?
jig
I don't
head.
even think you had a tail.
Came up and
because
smashed.
we were laughing. Oh,
Yeah.
Well, Dan yesterday was bragging about trying to catch one with nothing but a bare hook.
But I did.
It didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that you get with pristine waters that have low pressure is ultimately they're gullible fish, and I think that really kind of that adds to the experience. You're able to catch numbers of fish under the right circumstances, but really to culminate this trip, to culminate this experience, it's a very comfortable place. The food, you're not going to lose weight.
No.
Goodness, no. The food's fantastic, whether you're having supper here at the lodge at the end of the day or shore lunch, which you guys put a lot of time into making that shore lunch experience good, and I don't think anybody has complained once. In fact, I know this is going to probably come as a huge surprise to you. I'm no good at cleaning fish, and I don't eat a lot of fish. But I would eat fish here every single day.
awesome.
And we get up onto the shore, and Rylan and Barry are cutting potatoes, and I'm going to expose a secret here, and I'm taking this home.
No, cut the podcast. No, turn it off.
If you have not tried this is all. Whoever figured this out, high five. But Rylan introduced this to me, where he puts Frank's hot sauce in a bag,
Marinates it.
and the fish fillets go in the hot sauce, and then for some unknown reason, there's a little bit of spice, but it doesn't like melt your face off hot.
No.
But the way that it crisps the fish in the oil is unbelievable.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
and it kind of mellows out that trout flavor. That fishy, salmon-y type.
I didn't even know what I was eating.
Yeah.
You can't
It's
tell.
delicious.
And it works as a good binder.
Absolutely does.
Well, that was you that brought the Franks in, wasn't
Yeah.
it, Trevor?
Oh, so it's you that
yeah.
developed this. Okay, all right. Credit where credit is due.
A lot of times Frank's or some lemon juice, Either
Yeah.
one of those two does the same thing. Yeah, and it works very effectively.
But the shore launch locations that I've been to, I think we've been to 3, are very easy to get to, and it doesn't take very long. It's comfortable, and I think I feel like that's one of the first things you're going to hear about when people are recounting this experience is the fishing was awesome, the people were great, the shore launches were to die for. There's all of that come together into this Tazin Lake experience that if you want to have that experience of a lifetime, you have everything, and you're going to leave with new relationships. You're going to leave with memories you're never going to forget. And the only regret that I have is that my kids weren't here to be a part of this. But because of the time I had here, like it's going to be on the list, and we're going to come back because that experience is just to die for. I said something there again that shut off the GoPros. Isn't that crazy how that works?
Censorship.
This one's still working.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still running.
Yeah, that's all right. Hey, this is raw. I'm not even editing that out.
Perfect.
The Tazin Lake Lodge experience is one that I would highly recommend. And I know that you guys at this table, I'm preaching to the choir. This is something you care a lot about, and it's something you want to share. That's the thing I love about what you guys are working collectively to do, is to share this experience with the world, because it is something that people need to have in their experience bucket, things to look back on and remember. This is something you'll never forget.
No, for sure. Yeah. Over the years, any clients come in, and they've been many other places before, come in and go, wow, I never realized the terrain and how beautiful this place is as compared to others. You know, everything's a picture.
Then they always say the pictures don't do it justice.
No, they can't.
Of course.
It's not possible. And that's, I think, the beauty of just the human element is you have to experience something to relive it. And there really is no way to put into words the water, the rugged terrain, the fishing, the remote component of being here. It just it's almost like a feeling deep in your gut that you know that there's no civilization within reach here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's vulnerability or if it's appreciation or if it's a combination of all that, but it's a true sense of adventure that it's not fear, but you're like, like we're a long ways here.
You're in the wild.
You're in the wild, and you have this sense, the sense of adventure that I think you need to have to really live life right. Is all right here.
Yeah, you can really get away and unplug up here, but there is a little bit of a safety net because we have the internet at the lodge. So if you do need to, like a lot of guys at work like us, we're able to come up here for 2 weeks this year, and if we didn't have the ability to access, some things back home and we get some work done while we're here. So there's a lot of guys that have businesses that come up here and they want to be able to. You can get 100 yards away from the lodge and there's no internet, so you can get away from it. You're out on the lake. There's no cell service. There's no internet. You're listening to loons. You're breathing fresh air. You're looking at the scenery. You're catching fish. So you can unplug and get away. Yet come back. And when Barry has a plane here like this, and Trevor has some training in wilderness survival and first responder, so you essentially have, if you're going to go to a remote place, you have the right people here. If something were to go wrong, you have the right people here for that type of situation.
Absolutely, yeah. Our chef's a first responder as well. I'm a first aid instructor, so yeah, we definitely are able to, help people out.
Well, listen, if I go down, I don't want mouth to mouth. Like, just put me in a bear bait somewhere.
I was going to give Bret that spot.
Put me in a bear bait.
Good thing I don't recommend that.
This is an experience you have to put on your bucket list, and you have to make it happen. I'm sad that it's almost over. It went quick, but
we still got a couple days.
We do have a couple days
today and tomorrow. So,
well, listen, if you're looking for adventure, if you want to start filling or putting check marks on that bucket list, and Tazin Lake Lodge needs to be at the top. Talk to me a little bit, Bret. Where is the best information? Where do people need to go to get that set up?
For sure. We've got, we try to answer every question on the website. So TazinLake.com. You can Google search Tazin Lake or hashtag Tazin Lake Experience, and you'll be able to see all the pictures and videos. And of course, we have videos on our YouTube channel, the Tazin Lake Lodge YouTube channel. Those are all linked and embedded on the website too. So if you go to TazinLake.com or our Facebook page, we have Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and you'll be able to get all. And if you still have questions, just get a hold of us. You can email us from the site. You can call us from the site. You can reach out to me about travel, logistics, and how to do all that. But all of our dates, pictures of the accommodations, things like that are all on the website.
Well, we keep the same dates every year.
Yeah.
Just so everybody is aware of that. June 14th to September 12th. It's a 5-day rotation. So,
Yeah, and you come in, and I think you spend 6 days, 5 nights in camp. You fish 5 days, so you'll come into Fort McMurray, and you'll fly out from McMurray Aviation in the afternoon. You get into the lodge in the evening. They come in, they cook you supper, and then you fish for 5 days, and then fly out in the afternoon to go back. And so we recommend trying to stay in Fort Mac, on the front end and the back end, so it'd be a 7-day trip for a lot of people.
Well,
or
that
come early, right?
Or come early. Yeah.
Some clients.
It depends on plane schedules if it works out.
Exactly.
But you want with that float plane, you want to plan for some potential weather too and some delays. So
I would the day before and after is a great idea. It does allow you to kind of get yourself squared away, and you're not rushing around. I mean, airports suck.
Yeah,
they sure do.
And so it's nice to kind of have a day of just all right, I'm gonna go grab a bite to eat, get a good sleep and wake up and make it over to McMurray Aviation.
And Fort
Easy.
Mac's a big city. You know, they got everything: restaurants, hotels. You know,
Run
whatever
some
you
last
need.
errands if you need
Walmarts.
to.
Anything you need there.
And we have a great deal with some of the local hotels too as well. So we have some specials just for Tazin Lake Lodge clients. Yeah.
So as the youngest representing member of this group, why do people need to come here?
I feel like we've kind of hit it. It's you don't get this experience in central Minnesota. You don't get this going down south bass fishing, whether you like lake trout or not. You know, we've heard this. You guys have heard this at sports shows. People be like, well, do you have this fish or,
Walleye for lunch.
Walleye, or it's like, oh, lake trout. Well, we catch those on Lake Michigan, and that's boring. You know, like,
This is a great point, actually.
yeah, like you talked about
Yeah.
with the lead core, and you just water ski
ski.
them in, and there are a lot of people. Lake trout don't appeal to them.
Yeah.
But if you catch one of these Lakers, even the action fish on a spinning rod,
Hooked for life.
it's so much fun. If we had these fish back home, people wouldn't fish for walleyes. Maybe they would for a shore lunch, but nobody would go try to sharpshoot a walleye if they could sharpshoot more lake trout.
It's
so much fun.
It's like fishing walleye for walleye on steroids, and it's that lake trout fishing here is a completely different experience than the Great Lakes lake trout fishing for the most part.
It's a vertical fight. You're not just
It's
running
hand to
around
hand.
the lake. Yeah, you feel power on those rods. The heaviest rod you use, you feel power.
Yeah, and one line per client. So you don't. It's not like the charter boats.
Yeah.
It's multiples. It's one line per client. You're in tune and you're ready.
Well, and to be fair, there's a great experience to be had on the Great Lakes, and you're catching species that you can only catch that way. But I think that as far as I'm concerned, a fish in his natural habitat is worthy game, is a worthy pursuit to have. But to get it in a place like this, the fish are awesome, and you come up here for the fish, but you leave having experienced so much more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like that Great Lakes thing, I mean, you can have fun fighting fish there, but it's more of a meat run, more of a salmon run, things like that. You come up here, it's big. It's like big game hunting.
Yeah,
it
honestly.
is.
Absolutely. It's hunting. Yeah.
And have that mindset, being a muskie guy, like there is nothing here that I didn't expect. There was, I know that we're not going to just, unless you have the luck this guy has, you're not going to go catch all kinds of fish, back to back to back to back. But it does take time and a commitment level. But we got it done. Had an amazing experience. I'm looking forward to sharing this show with everybody. The In-Fisherman TV show will air in Q1 of 2025. So we'll have our experience shared there, and we're going to try to wrap it up with an additional segment today. We're going to focus on another pike or two, an action trout or two, but ultimately, we want you to come experience this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's an unbelievable place, unbelievable accommodations, great people, and just high fives all around, guys. This is awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're glad you came too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hey, thanks for being a part of this. This is In-Fisherman Storyline. Please check us out on Spotify, Amazon, all your iTunes, your regular podcast distribution centers. Thanks for being here. Share this with your friends, and we will catch you on the next episode of In-Fisherman Storyline.